Good morning, everybody. We are going to get started unless my team holds me back because we have an amazing day for you. And it's just the whole morning is incredible. A little bit of a nod to Etta James for that fantastic welcoming music. And welcome. Got a hashtag. So if you're on your social media, hashtag Digital Trust Summit, keep the conversation going over there on your Twitter and your Instagrams, all those things. Really great to have you all and enjoy seeing you in that modality too. A little bit of a view of what we're going to be doing today. We are going to start off with a student panel. We have some fantastic students that are going to be joining us. And frankly, the whole reason we're here is really thinking about our students and thinking about you guys and your journeys and how we can help you along those journeys. And frankly, how we can start changing the world together. So I'm very excited that we're going to kick off with some of our fantastic students. From that, we're going to roll right in to Ada Paris and Marcus Anderson. Ada is a futurist joining us from London. Marcus is a former NFL player and now a cyborg anthropologist, and just both of them are fascinating. They'll actually be joining us live, but we'll have a video since Ada's in London. So we'll have them live on the chat and we'll be watching something that they've recorded while we've got them in both live and async mode. After that, we'll take a little bit of a humanity break. We're going to roll right from the humanity break into some neighborhood breakouts, where we're going to have fantastic conversations around self-sovereign identity, around the future of cybersecurity, around the future of cybersecurity careers, really fantastic afternoon breakouts. You can decide where you want to go. Then we'll take a little bit of a break and we will all come back for Innovate. We have a really amazing Innovate this afternoon. Some of you may have attended former Innovates where we talk about a lot of these wonderful topics in depth. Today, we're going to be talking about Pocket, which is ASU's work in self-sovereign identity. Next slide, please. All of the work that we're doing here is grounded in ASU's work towards digital trust. And just to give you a sense of what that means to us, although across the tone of today, you're going to get a lot more depth, we believe in transparency and help. You should be able to tell what we do with your data. If you sign that click that terms of service or a privacy statement, it should make sense to you and you should have a good sense of what we're actually doing with all the data that you have. We should be transparent with these data processes, but we should also be helpful. We're not just doing it to give you long lists of words, but rather to make sure that we are giving you agency and help along the way. We do all of that through Privacy by Design. Our keynote tomorrow is the creator of Privacy by Design. And that's a really deep part of how we think about this from the very beginning of designing experiences all the way through. Security at a fundamental piece, especially in a day of ransomware and as crazy as our cybersecurity world is right now. Security by design is a very key component. And then all of this is ultimately to create more agency, more self-determination, you being able to figure out and actually activate the futures that you want for yourselves and for all of us around you. Next slide. Today is made possible by some incredible partners that have long stood by helping us create the things that we create here at ASU. TopTal, for those of you that were able to enjoy yesterday's TopTal activities, they were pretty fun. They've been a really great supporter for us. CrowdStrike, who you'll hear from all these folks later on today, Informatica, Proofpoint, and of course Palo Alto. And then a community partner in Leonardo, who also have a session today. I encourage you to check them out as well. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Hey guys, where is everybody from? Yesterday we did a bit of an activity and we're from all over, including Nigeria. I saw you in the chat. So please hop into the Zoom chat and talk to us. Let us know where you're joining us from this morning. Maybe let us know what time it is there. It is 9 o'clock here in the desert. Pretty close to 39 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you, or Celsius for those of you who are on the other side of the map from us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a Slack channel. You should have all been invited to it. That channel is the Digital Trust Lobby. During the sessions, we'll all be in the Zoom chat, chatting inside of Zoom. Outside of the sessions and as we connect sessions, we'd love to meet you inside of our Slack environment. Lots of ways to use Slack, but I encourage you to think about threading. There are lots of us that are in that channel. So as you hear something, use the threaded feature to comment on it. That way we can keep a nice nesting of the conversations and make it a little bit easier to have lots of conversations in one channel. So appreciate your help there. And then yesterday, towards the end of the event, we announced, next slide, we announced a art contest. CrowdStrike is working with us to really highlight and raise awareness for adversaries that are frankly targeting higher ed specifically. And so next slide, please. They've got a contest that they're inviting us to. You can go into the lobby and work with Grace Bergen if you have any questions. The whole focus of this is an art competition with lots of flexibility as to how you want to respond to that challenge around knowing our adversaries. They're pretty creative with how you could think about this. Let's go to the next slide. And all of it is focused on a particular adversary that's known to go after higher ed as a target, and that is the wizard spider. So a little bit of inspiration in terms of who that adversary is, and the contest will run between now and the 16th. Go to the next one. Just a little bit about Wicked Spider. There's lots of ransomware that's happening across the country, and this is one of many of these terrible threat actors that we're trying to, frankly, figure out how to get better processes around both technology and social political policies. So an important thing for us to consider. The last slide is the obligatory legal language around how they're conducting this. But it's a free contest and all those kinds of things. You can ask Grace for more questions, and we encourage you to compete and to bring your creative juices to bear as we enjoy that contest. Without much ado more, unless there's anything here. Oh, there's Grace in the chat. So you can ask Grace. She's here with us live. All right, I took a quick look at the chat. Oh my gosh, we have folks from all over. This is wonderful. We're going to roll right into our student panel. So let me hand it off to Kevin and Samantha to introduce our students.
Hey everyone, welcome to our first major event of day 2 of the Digital Trust Summit. As Donna stated, students, really, learners are the reason why we're all here today. We talk about protecting, we talk about security and transparency and privacy, but it's all about, especially at ASU, how does that impact our community? We believe in this concept of the universal learner, or the fact that everyone is a learner or lifelong learners. And we were so excited to be joined by 6 from the ASU community today. And I'm really excited to be moderating this session with Kevin Lowe, my co-moderator, who will be helping us kick off introductions to the students. But I just wanted to thank all the students personally and just kind of share that the reason that we're kicking off today with a student panel is to set the tone of who we're actually accommodating, who we're actually catering to, who we're actually designing and scaling solutions for. And that's the learners. So if we ignore learner voice, it's at our own detriment. It's actually the learners who can help us actually scale, so you can see the image behind me, over all the mountains and frontiers of digital trust. So really pleased to have students join us today. And over to you, Kevin, to get some introductions going.
All right, then let's start it off with introductions. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and what digital trust means to you? Let's start with Luisana.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're from. My name is Luisana Granillo, and I'm a graduate student at the Merely Fulton Teachers College here at Arizona State University. I'm pursuing my Master's for Education in Learning Design and Technologies, which is a program that has really helped me develop my understanding in theory and technology and how we can use that to support students. I'm also a management intern at ASU, where I get to help the university manage a variety of digital communication tools that support student success, such as chatbots, case management systems, or mobile apps. I'm here today because I really see my career continuing to evolve in higher education and in education technology. So yeah, I'm here to hear about the challenges that you're all having and share upon my experiences.
Can we hear from Luciano now?
Hello, everyone. My name is Eduardo Luciano Wapaya, but you guys may call me Luciano. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer from the Gambia, and I am currently at Thunderbird School of Global Management pursuing my global management degree. And I'm currently an intern for GoDaddy. So,
Can you tell us a bit about what digital trust means to you and how it relates to your work?
yeah, I think digital trust is significant as we've been transitioning more into the pandemic. We're kind of forced into it, and with this adoption of trust in technology, we're seeing a lot more utility of IoT and everything that comes from the internet. So yeah.
Thank you. Can we hear from Jagan Pandari?
Everyone, my name is Jagan Pandari. I'm a graduate of ASU Biomedical Engineering in 2019. For the past 2 years, I've been working at Johnson & Johnson, and now I'm going, as Luciano, going to be a graduate student at Thunderbird starting this fall. To me, I was really excited to join the student panel because I felt like digital trust is shaping so much of our future job opportunities, not just for the incoming graduate class, but for all graduate classes coming forward, especially in the field of healthcare and innovation, what it means to take your consumer data, what it means to have patient data readily available at all times, what's our core tenets and responsibilities with it as people on the backside of that data, what can they do to be more responsible with it, what can patients and consumers do to be more mindful of it, I think is really fascinating to talk about, and one of the big reasons why I'm here. So
yeah, I completely agree. Rachel Howard?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel. I really fit the archetype of the professional amateur very well. I started out my college career in journalism at Walter Cronkite. And then from there, very quickly got into multimedia and realized I just love creating things. So I've taken a certificate in game design. I'm currently working with the Immersive Creation Studio on campus. And I just really love creating things with technology and in this digital age. And obviously, trust is interwoven into that and into digital storytelling, everywhere. There's transparency. There's the issue of trust between, even from getting people to trust, articles that I put online to getting people to even just trust like the download links that I post because I want them to play this new app or software that I've created. So obviously, going both directions, there's a lot of trust. SEO and marketing, I've done PR in Cronkite. So there's just every step of the way, it's about trust and relationship.
Nathaniel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nathaniel Ross. I'm a student at both the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and the College of Integrated Arts and Sciences and Arts, or Sciences and Arts, sorry. I am currently getting bachelor's degrees in biological science, history, political science, and applied quantitative science. And I eventually want to work in public policy, specifically within disability policy. So accessibility is really one of my largest concerns because that's inextricably linked to technological advancement. So I want to make sure that simply because someone needs to rely on technology more to be more accessed into our modern world, that they're not going to be at a larger risk for invasion of their privacy and that their data is just as secure as anyone else. And so I wanted to really bring those sorts of concerns to the attention. So that's why I wanted to join this panel.
Last but certainly not least, we have Summer with us today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Summer Hassan. I was a student of the School of Human Evolution and Social Change. I just graduated from Global Health and also a certificate in cross-sector leadership. I joined this panel to talk about digital trust amongst patients in the field of medicine, especially during this pandemic. Am currently working at the vaccination sites. It's very important to me. I think digital trust plays such a huge role when it comes to protecting patient information. So that's a huge interest of mine.
Well, looks like we got a wonderful lineup today. Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves and sharing a bit about you. Admittedly, I was getting some private DMs during your introductions by people who have said, wow, I feel like an underachiever compared to these students. What you've amassed in your time at ASU and beyond is just staggering and amazing. Just getting right into things with the next question. Jagan, this one is for you to start us off with. The first question is really around data privacy. What do you and maybe other students care about when it comes to your data and data privacy?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking me that, Samantha. So for me, as a new student now coming back into ASU, data privacy to me is not just on how transparent a university can be with the data, but also transparent with how exactly they're sharing the information. If we notice, we've been using Slack, Zoom, different apps all throughout ASU's campus. So how ASU managed to share our information with other apps and different facilities around ASU, I think is kind of something that I would like to see some more. And I think other universities too can lead an example by sharing more of like transparency with how people are getting to use their own data all around campuses. I think another important thing is on how university admissions, how data taken by the student population, how that's factored into university admissions decisions. How does being a minority or not affect into decision making? How does being like a star athlete affect in decision making? And how much of that information is really seen in the public view versus the private sector, I think is kind of interesting to think about, and something that I personally as a student am very interested in when it comes to data privacy.
Thanks, Jagan. Same question over to you, Lusana. Given that you have a more than slightly different background than Jagan, where are you coming at in terms of data and data privacy in your view on that?
So I think that there's often a common misconception that students and my generation don't care about data privacy, which to a point may be understandable. We are digital natives. We have social media where we post a lot about our private lives, the majority of us. And it can be easy to interpret this as us not valuing privacy, but in reality, I would argue that we really do. So personally, things like having my cell phone number shared to political parties who are texting us about who we're voting for, who we should vote for during the elections, or things like having my personal emails being sold to private loan companies that are trying to get me to take out a loan for my education. So I think that the bottom line is that we need to ensure that our data is being used predominantly for educational purposes. So really thinking about what is contributing to our experiences as students. So I think using data for things like attendance and sharing that with professors so that they can reach out to us to see if there's something going on in our lives, or sharing data about our financial aid status to see if there are other scholarships that we may qualify for. I recognize that it takes a community for a student to be successful. So I would like to trust that an institution is using my data for those purposes.
Thank you so much, both Jagan and Lusana. Just a short story. I happened to be in Louisiana this past week, and when we touched back down into Chicago where we live, my husband and I noticed an influx of spam text messages and phone calls from Louisiana phone numbers, and we were talking, how did that happen? That's because data is constantly moving with and around us. So data privacy is, only growing in interest. And to plug the later Innovate session happening tonight, ASU is actually working on an ecosystem and a solution to allow learners to have greater agency and control over how their data is shared. So thank you so much, Lusana and Jagan. Over to you, Kevin.
I was also going to mention that ties in wonderfully with the idea from yesterday's keynote about the entities collecting data being stewards and benevolent intention of use with the data. But on to the next question. So this one's at you, Luciano. How do you imagine emerging technologies or even more nascent tools impacting the future of the workplace and business?
Thank you, Kevin, for asking me that question. With it already accelerating, we're going to see businesses adapt more into it. And one of the pros is it can accelerate the workflow and how business operates with their analytics and with automation. One of the cons to that is I feel like just because we're trusting technology too rapidly, we're probably going to trust it too much, where we're only going to have one point of view and not being able to double check the work. And in terms of first world countries and developing countries, first world countries have the luxury of having electricity readily available and all of these equitable solutions, I would say, and have the infrastructure in place. And we're able to teach our students the necessities for data mining and all this kind of stuff on blockchain ledgers. But I feel, to my perspective, developing countries are going to come of a significant learning curve as they do not even have the infrastructure readily available.
And same question to you, Jagan. With a similar background in management, I think you could offer a perspective.
Yeah, so thanks for asking, Kevin. As we've seen, like in the past year or so, the pandemic has really shaken up what it means to be in the workforce. And I know that for me, past 2 years, I've been working 1 year without the pandemic, 1 year with the pandemic. It's really shown to me that people can work from anywhere in the world. But what does that mean when it comes to digital trust, to data privacy? Is there such a thing as an offshore team if they're doing the exact same work as you? They're just in a different country, in a different time zone. How much restrictions do they have versus you, who just might be a block away from the headquarters of your company? I know for the company that I was working for, Johnson & Johnson, that line was very muddy at times, and it was getting clearer and clearer as, you know, more lines in the sand were being drawn. But going forward, with many different companies, with many companies adopting a partial work from home model, partial come into the office model, I think it's an interesting question upon this question to ask: how do companies work with being offshore digital trust, on-site digital trust, and everything in between? What does that really mean? And that's been my experience so far.
Thank you for that perspective. I think we'll move on to the next question.
All right. And Nathaniel, we haven't heard from you yet, so I'm going to gear this one towards you right now and then shoot it over to a few other panelists. With the rapid advancement of technology, especially to promote learner engagement and agency, which we've definitely seen throughout the pandemic, what are some future applications that are particularly of interest to you?
Thank you for that question. So my kind of engagement within the education system is from an outsider lens. So I'm a co-founder of an education-based organization that provides a digital platform for high school administrators that helps identify student interests. And so we kind of create these actionable information and data sets for administrators to better cater their school environment, so students can feel more connected and improve those feelings of belonging within their school community. And our organizations run beta testing in 2 Arizona high schools. And so one of the first things we noticed and that we wanted to bring up and the administrators wanted to bring up is how we were going to protect student data, because that's what we were collecting in order to find out this information. And so maintaining that privacy and that protection and security was really important to us. So as a student run organization, we kind of were learning as we went. And so I think that as we build this future of digital trust, we really hope there is a better infrastructure in place so that student-run organizations like ours are better able to engage with education and school communities at all levels and that we'll be better prepared to meet the privacy and security needs of schools and students. So I think that'll definitely be part of our future.
Thanks, Nathaniel. I'm going to ask you the same question, Rachel. What are some future applications that interest you, given your background?
Well, my background makes me very interested in extended reality in particular, and I think that that is something that we're seeing become increasingly accessible for more and more people. So I would really love to see that continue expanding. I would really love to see us go from Zoom classrooms to maybe one day VR classrooms or augmented reality classrooms, using those to teach in the space and stuff like that. So that's really cool and promising technology, I think, for learning and increasing people's ability to engage, kinesthetically and tactilely with, I don't know the right word for that, with the learning and engage different types of learners. And that I think kind of leads into the whole diversity and equity and inclusion conversation too, with just an ability to spread this education to more people. And of course, when you're expanding it, then you've got to start thinking about, like, how can we set up this education in a way that's going to respect people's different styles of learning, different needs, different cultures and backgrounds and histories, and you get into the trust conversation that there a little bit with, like, how can we show our students that they can trust the learning that we're delivering to them and the technology that we're using to do it.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm so happy you brought up this concept of extended reality. Digital is just a modifier of trust. And as we have a more emerging technology enabled environments, particularly XR, there's going to be, questions of ethics, that come into play. Here at ASU, we're kind of looking at the intersection of immersive and humanized learning, and we're calling it hummersive learning. So I think part of that trust could be the humanization of things that feel maybe untrustworthy to us. I'm going to throw the same question over to you, Lusana. As someone, you work every day with emerging technology with our chatbot here at ASU. Tell us a bit about your experience with that and some future applications that you're looking forward to.
So I would like to continue to learn more about artificial intelligence and how that can play a role within education. I see AI rapidly growing, like the research is immense, and there are so many really exciting ideas that are being talked about. So I've learned about things like creating tutoring bots that can kind of gauge where a student is at within a certain concept in math or science. And then that bot can then tutor that student depending on their performance. I've also learned about things like grading bots, which would be assistants for professors who, with the AI, it would provide students with feedback at a much faster rate and also grading it. So all of this really excites me. And although it makes me jump of excitement and eagerness, I do recognize that there's a very fine line with this between digital trust. For example, digital trust can be broken because currently there are a lot of students who are tutors and are employed through those avenues, or they are teaching assistants and they assist professors. And so that may cause students to break digital trust if they are no longer employed and receiving that form of income. I also know that there are problems like the accuracy of the AI. From my experience, there's always a human behind artificial intelligence, kind of training it and teaching it the different concepts that it should know to interact with humans. So although all of these are very beneficial, I would really like to continue to do research in this and in these innovations and ensure that they are being implemented in principled ways.
Being innovated in principled ways. I really, really appreciate that as a statement. It's not just about innovating, it's about innovating responsibly. And there's so much that goes into that aside from just creating the next, shiny new thing. And so it's really motivating to have students like you at the forefront of actually designing those solutions. Thank you so much. And back over to you, Kevin.
All right, a couple student panelists have touched on this next topic tangentially already, but I'm really excited to hear a targeted question on it. I know we've already mentioned how technology is a leveler in the field and allows us to reach out to communities that otherwise we would have trouble reaching out. So this question's for you, Summer. How do you envision emerging technologies and digital trust impacting community engagement and agency within minority groups?
Yeah, so I mean, over this past year, I was very fortunate enough to work heavily in the pandemic in multiple ways. I got to do some research closely with one of the professors at Arizona State University in partnership with ValleyWise. And one of our focuses was on cultural health navigators and the effect that the pandemic had on them. And ultimately, cultural health navigators primarily work with minority groups and go above and beyond to build a bond with them to help bridge the gap in the field of healthcare. So whether it's language barriers or cultural tolerance, they truly, they do it all. So during the pandemic, all of their regular patients had to start visiting them through telemedicine, which was a huge change for the average person. So the one thing that I had noticed during my research with the groups is that they struggled a lot with that. And with telemedicine, digital trust is a huge thing because you don't know whether or not you're receiving, number one, adequate care, whether or not your information is going to remain private. And a lot of patients were scared to turn on their cameras, or they were just terrified all around. So one thing that I noticed that we were doing, that the cultural health navigators kind of took upon themselves to do, was just to create digital videos to send out to these patients. And the videos were in the language, whether it was in Burmese, in Arabic, or in Somali. It was just to send out to their patients to kind of build that trust with, you know, the patients that they would constantly see, and show them how to use telemedicine and show them that it's still us on the other end of this. So with things like that, I think patients were super curious whether or not that they were going to receive adequate care, because it was a very terrifying time. So I think with things like that, it's just super important that we build that trust and we humanize the situation as much as like we're on the other end of a camera. So that's something that when we incorporated videos, and we got to also like remove the misspread of misinformation surrounding the pandemic, the cultural health navigators kind of stepped up and did that. So on the end of medicine and digital trust and telemedicine and incorporating all of those and integrating everything, I thought it was very interesting to see the field of medicine kind of take a very digital approach to everything, because it's not necessarily their field, but they really stepped up and kind of partnered in with the field of the media and technology to do what they had to do.
That's a wonderful example of humanizing technology and allowing specific individuals customized access and agency with technology. Back to you, Sam.
Yeah, Summer, that's really inspiring because, you know, we talk a lot about digital equity and technology. As our keynote speaker at the reception last night, Joanna Gamma, said, you know, technology can be a great enabler and equalizer for marginalized communities, but it also could be an exacerbator for equity issues. So I really think that you hit on some really important points. Humanizing something or building trust may look a little bit different to different communities. So I'm really happy that you brought up that point. Continuing a little bit on that theme, 2020 and 2021 have already been big years in terms of health literacy with the pandemic, as well as social justice. Given the times that we live in, what does digital trust look like or mean to you in that context? And I'll throw this over to you, Nathaniel, given your perspectives on medical agency for differently abled groups.
Yeah, so I think this also kind of speaks to the previous question on minority groups and how this sort of transition and future will be impacting them. The advancement of things like telemedicine, but also outside of the health field, people with disabilities have really benefited a lot from the transition to more accessible remote environments. I know that so much of this happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but issues of accessibility and ability to work in the remote environment is something that the disabled community has had a roadblock to access for a really long time. And as we shift to nearing the end of the pandemic, a lot of these features are kind of slowly going away. And so people like me are really concerned by that. We kind of want this change to be something that is going to still be an option and still be promoted and still be worked on in the future. And so I think that that's worth exploring and figuring out ways how to integrate both in-person and remotely accessible work for both education, for jobs, for everything that can be done remotely. How are we going to find ways of ensuring that people with disabilities are still having equal access to those fields? I know for me, there were points in time during my college career where I was in the hospital, but I was still able to maintain my coursework and my classes because I was able to have that remote access during the pandemic. So I think that we need to kind of examine those needs and really try to not go backwards in the access that the disabled community has engaged with. And I think it's going to be one of our big steps in this kind of digital trust future, making sure that we still focus on what progress that we've already made.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel, especially for shining a light on accessibility issues. As I shared before, digital equity and accessibility go hand in hand. I'd like to throw the same question back over to you, Summer, given your positioning and work in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, so personally, I've been working I was so involved with the pandemic. I was fortunate enough to work at the vaccine sites. I was the site manager at the State Farm vaccine site. So at that site, we were vaccinating up to 14,000 patients a day. So daily, I'm dealing with patients that don't understand the basic questions we're asking. And one of the questions I'm sure most of you might be familiar with is, have you ever received passive antibody therapy treatment as a treatment for COVID-19? And a lot of people didn't understand that language. So it was a thing of where we had 120 volunteers a day asking that question. And these 120 volunteers are non-medical. So we can't have them rephrase it because they're not medical personnel. So it was just going back to and having them understand that even though they have the access to our digital information and patient information and that responsibility to make sure that they're using the healthcare terminology correctly, but just not allowing them to overly simplify it in the sense of that they're taking away from what the language actually means. So I think the main thing is also just in my job position, it was just providing staff and volunteers and personnel with and educating them about what the language meant. And if they had questions, just referring them back to us. And then also like HIPAA. I think HIPAA is such a big thing surrounding digital trust when it comes to telemedicine, and also just even at the vaccine sites is we're working with digital information and patient personal information. We had high profile patients come and get vaccinated, but it was always just going back to the core values of we're here to vaccinate people day by day, and there's nothing that's going to change or violate our protocols at the end of the day. As exciting as it might be to see someone you've always wanted to meet, you can't divulge that person's information. And just going back to the core and the root values of what you would do at a clinic, and just emphasizing why we do what we do. So even though, the vaccine sites were on such a high scale level and it didn't necessarily feel like a clinical environment, we had to take it back down and have that reminder. So every day when I would do a huddle, I still do that every single day. I did one this morning, and it was just a friendly reminder of, even though it's just we're at the end of the road with this, it just goes back down to the core values. And I think every day it's a great reminder of, no matter where you're at or what field you're in, whether it's healthcare or just a classroom setting, digital trust plays such a huge role in every single one of our lives, whether it's students you're dealing with or educators. So I just think that's such an important thing and such an important element to everything that we do. It's a value that we carry on with everything that we do.
Thank you so much, Summer. And thank you, Nathaniel, for, I think, addressing what is quite a complex question, especially given everything that's happened in the past year and a half. I'll throw it back over to you, Kevin, for the final word before we open the floor for questions from the audience.
Yeah, I was very excited to hear what Summer and Nathan had to say there. It actually touches a lot on what I do at ASU as well. I get to work regularly with HIPAA and the corresponding student data policies, FERPA, and my team helps to inform policy at ASU. And I know you were talking about the staff on site being educated so that they could provide assurances to the people coming in for vaccinations. We have to do a very similar thing. It starts with educating your staff. The most common data loss is caused by staff error or human error, not even technology. So if before we do open it up to the audience to ask questions, I would like to ask the student panelists if there's anything they feel was missed that they would provide information on their backgrounds or any conversation they want to start. If not, we can start opening up the floor to audience questions. I think we're good to go to audience questions.
Okay, fabulous. The first question, I think a bunch already came in, but feel free if you're in the chat, write your questions for these students in the chat. Also, if you're a tweeter, feel free to tweet out your questions and also any color commentary on this panel with the hashtag Digital Trust Summit. But the first question for our panelists is, do you talk to your peers about digital trust or entities that you question their intent? What would you ask ASU to tell you about the data we have?
I can start on that one. I think oftentimes issues of privacy and data security are not taken quite as seriously as they should be. I think there is a lot of like our peers have lived an entire life where we don't really know a time when technology wasn't at the palm of our hand. And so we are just at this point where we're so used to always accepting terms of agreements of releasing data or having cell phones and other kind of data aggregators just so integrated within our lives. And I think that's something that we'll need to have a culture shift within our generation of, okay, well, they don't have to have this information. Why do they need this information? What are they doing with it? And do we want that actually being sent out into the world and through to people that we don't know? And so I think that conversation needs to be happening more. I don't think it's happening enough. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear what the other students have to say.
Any other thoughts on this one? Conversations with peers. I'm sure all of you also have peers in different fields, different areas of study, different perspectives.
And to the second part of the question, if anyone not employed by ASU has questions about how ASU employs data.
I was actually going to touch a little bit of kind of following up on Nathan's point of how companies and organizations always try to maximize the amount of information from the data that we have, but we never question why. And I think that's crucial coming forward as it comes to data and ethics.
Very good point. Really good point. There was two questions in the chat that sort of go hand in hand, so I'm going to find a way to combine them. It's a lot about privacy and safety. So would love to hear any thoughts from the panel about cameras in public spaces, including campuses, and the potential for conflict between privacy and safety. So, what's your opinion in general on surveillance technology?
So Jagan speaking. So I think that ASU has done a really good job of showing that surveillance technology can be used for good. Campus, I know, has like a lot of the blue boxes for safety reasons. And alongside them, they have cameras built in everywhere. And personally, I feel safer with the cameras there. But I do understand the increased, I guess maybe student awareness that having all these cameras there is like also wondering like why is there a need for so much surveillance, I guess. And I think that it makes the student population safer within the campus area. But if you extend like the campus out, like as considering on how much ASU is growing over the past couple of years, the fact that more and more cameras are being set up everywhere is a little concerning for sure, because how much does that impact the general population that aren't necessarily ASU community, ASU students, faculty, et cetera. I think that's something that would need to be like looked at, I would think.
Tangential to that, but with the very relevant with the boom in online education, what are your thoughts on online proctoring?
Well,
the P word.
well, with online proctoring, I think that it's necessary for students. I mean, obviously ASU has its code of conduct that every student must apply to. And I think when professors need to proctor a student, it's no different than when professors would be walking up and down an aisle in order to check if students have any like illegal material during a test or an assignment or anything like that. Now, going back to, I think maybe this was touched upon in an earlier question, what do, when ASU partners with vendors and with different partners, this proctored video camera or video in itself, how does that, how is it distributed safely, or how is it not distributed safely? How is it destroyed or deleted? I think is something that that many students might not be aware of. I know that I certainly, when I was in school, was not very sure on how, after the proctoring was over, if I was flagged or not flagged for any suspicious activity afterwards, after an entire like resolution or of anything, how is that data lost, or how is it deleted? How is it saved moving forward?
In relation to the topic, I think it's very interesting of how we need to understand we're living in a global political economy, and everything is interconnected with business to government. And with the question regarding surveillance technology, we can see how China has surveillance technology, and it's affecting how it could mean better or worse in their world, where they have significantly contained the coronavirus. But there are some measurements of where they are not able to express in our terms of freedom of speech. And it is very crucial to understand differentiations of countries, let's say liberalism versus totalitarianism. And it's very crucial to understand how we need to not completely compare and contrast from a totally different reality of what we are living in.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Luciano. Looks like Summer has her hand up, so go over to you next for the same question.
I think when we talk about surveillance, it's like important to talk about what's being told to us that is being like watched. So when we're talking about proctoring, we know that we're being proctored. We know that, we're in a testing room and we're being proctored. I think when we're on campus, we don't necessarily know where we're being watched. At the vaccine sites, for instance, we have cameras, but staff or patients don't necessarily know that there's cameras around. So I think it's very interesting what you know and what you don't know. When you're at a traffic light, you don't necessarily, you're like, oh, there's a camera at this traffic light, so I can get away and I can run a red light or I can take a right turn. And sometimes you think you can get away with things. But I think overall, it's kind of like the disclaimer that's kind of left out versus what's not left out. So I think that's very interesting, and whether or not we're entitled to knowing or whether we're not entitled. So I don't know, I think that's more of a topic of conversation where I find that very interesting.
another topic that was brought up during our keynote yesterday, the idea of owning your own data. Any thoughts on that?
I'm actually also curious, just to build on that, what does data ownership actually mean to you in a world where data is often transactional and treated like currency in many ways? Well, let you think about that one. And there are other questions from the audience. There was one really great question, more broadly speaking, and this came from an attendee, not from ASU. What could and should colleges and universities be doing to educate the broader student population about digital privacy and trust? Do you personally have any ideas, whether nascent or something you've seen in action or participated in, about how to raise that awareness across curriculum and learning experiences that you've been a part of?
So I think the first thing that ASU can do is be completely, or as much as it can, be transparent about what data they have on students, how they use that data. And I think having those answers readily available to students will get them to at least starting to think, okay, well, if my university has this information on me and this is what they're using it for, what sort of data am I giving towards other companies or organizations, and what are they doing with it? I think asking those questions in the first place is a really important place to start to get students really more thinking about what sort of information they have out there. And I think that can be a great way of building that sort of trust within the ASU community and with ASU itself.
That's a great point. I was going to bring up transparency too. I didn't mean to step out right in front of you though, Luisana. But now that I'm already talking, I think transparency is a really great, it's so important, and also it's a really great way, it's a great armor for if things do go wrong. Like, you don't want to be caught where data has gotten out there, or you've lost data or something, you've misused data, and then all the students are finding out about this for the first time, and they're like, why did you even have that? Why were you still tracking that? And it goes for universities, it goes for businesses, it goes for developers. We want to know, people want to know what kind of data you're collecting, and if we don't even know as students, and we're not educated on what our data is being used for, then when things come up, we're going to be really scared to trust our data, to trust companies with our data, to trust our school with our data again, and we're going to be really just that relationship is really important from the beginning, that we're setting it up.
Thanks, Rachel. Lusana, over to you for the same question.
So I think it kind of ties back to the other question about if we talk about digital trust with our peers. So I feel like we do, but it's often not used like within this terminology. So we'll notice things like, oh, did you realize that yesterday when we were talking about like being interested in pursuing a certain major, I'm now receiving ads from that school about that major. So things like that have came up in the conversation. And so I think that we all notice it, and what colleges and universities can do to address that is maybe providing us with more. I don't know if there are classes at ASU that relate to data privacy and help us understand, especially students that don't have like a background with any digital technologies, help us understand what this means and how we can protect it. I know that at ASU, I believe that if you're a student worker, because when I was a student worker, I remember taking a class related to data protection, but I think it's only if you're an employee of ASU. So maybe expanding that to other students so that they can all be aware and more informed about this.
I'm glad you brought that up and the different terminology used. We talk quite a bit about, well, initially digital literacy and now digital fluency. Data fluency, I think, is a major part of that. How are people not only able to look at data, but also leverage data in unique ways? For example, some of this terminology, around digital trust we've been using, was really foreign to me, not necessarily coming from a technology field initially, someone that's more of a communicator or writer. But as I've gone on with my career, things like analyzing reactions from social media communities has become such an important part of the career of a communicator that I think potentially what could happen is some awareness building around how digital trust truly relates to every field. And I think this is something this group of students particularly is showing today, coming from all different backgrounds. A digital trust is actually something that ties together, all fields. So thank you so much, Lusana, for hitting on that one. Other builds on that point, or over to you, Kevin?
I have a lot to say on those last couple topics. I've been with the University Technology Office for almost 4 years now, and pretty much everything we just went through has come up through my work. I have helped inform the class, the information security class questions that you were talking about, Lusana. I have helped on drafting communications to the various data privacy agencies in the case of data breaches. Which you do have to inform exactly what data was involved in the breach, and it has to go out to communications to the people involved. So there are legal requirements for informing and transparency in those cases. And another one that came up, which I actually have a follow-up if we have enough time, we at UTO, we participate in a Cybersecurity Awareness Month every October. And I've actually helped draft a lot of the materials for that in the past. What are some ways that we could get more engagement and visibility that you could think of with the student body?
Well, I think maybe like translating these ideas into channels that we use. I don't know if there's communications about this or short videos on like social media, or I feel like apps that we are regularly engaging with would be a good idea. And I think also like we need the information within like short videos and something that is easy to read over, because when it's like a hour-long class or a longer kind of curriculum, it may not, I think, increase awareness as effectively, especially for those students who aren't connected to the technology field.
Yeah, and building off of that, I think also explaining the why a little bit more clearly. Why should students care about digital trust? Because I think a lot of students have heard that some of their favorite apps may not have the best privacy protections or might be collecting data at a very high rate, and they don't seem to really care. That knowledge isn't enough for them to question why they engage with those platforms. So why should they care? What are their digital rights that they should be kind of focusing on? And so I think better explaining the why might help reinforce the information that they have already accrued.
Yeah, and I think that Lusana made a great point earlier about making things digestible for students. And I really want to like highlight that because that's such a good point. Like as students, we're constantly bombarded with information. It's kind of why, as Nathaniel said earlier, you know, we get so used to just clicking agree on the terms and conditions without reading them or without, you know, actually like checking what kind of data is being collected. Just agree to the cookies. Like I need to use this site. I need to get this banner out of the way. So like making that information digestible if for us in an age where we're just bombarded with information would be really key to helping us understand why we should care and why we should really pay attention to these things.
Well, as a communicator, I'm happy to hear a lot of it's in the framing and the language that we use. And when we talk about the why, really like the unique value proposition for why we should pursue something, why we should click that box is important. I want to give a plug because we've been talking so much about data privacy and digital fluency and literacy here. Tomorrow at the Skills of the Future virtual career fair, not just for students, by the way, it's for anyone just interested in digital trust opportunities, careers, and career mobility. There is going to be, one of the speakers is from ASU on the data intelligence team, Elizabeth Riley. And so make sure you check out the Skills of the Future Fair students audience to kind of find out a little bit more about what a career in data and data related things and how that relates to trust actually looks like. I think we have time probably. Are there any other questions that I'm missing, Kevin? Otherwise, we could kind of go round robin to each student and hear a final word.
I think we touched on most of the questions that were coming up in the chat. We do have a question from Kate actually though on, do any of us actually read the information privacy policies, and do we have a general sense of what they mean?
Maybe it goes back to the framing and the language, right? A lot of times these privacy statements are heavily vetted, written by legal teams for legal protection and personal protection purposes.
They're not made to be accessible or digestible to people without legal knowledge. So I guess that could also be a first step, looking at privacy policies and making them understandable to general audiences.
Amen, Kevin.
And there are some companies that do that really well. Like there are privacy policies that off the top of my head, I've forgotten the company, but I remember reading them and I remember saying like, oh yeah, I understand. And I appreciate that they're telling me this. And then there's almost every other company, which is just like, you know, the legalese to protect themselves from, you know, legal problems.
Well, I think we are at time, so let's go around and do a final word from each of the students if they have anything left to say, any thoughts or comments.
Lusana, over to you first.
Me?
Yeah, we're just going to go round robin. What is the final kind of word or final thought you want to leave the audience with today?
Well, I really like and I enjoy that we are having these discussions, and I'd also really like to thank everyone for giving us this opportunity and this sort of safe space where we could talk about what we've been through, our experiences, and also our ideas according to our different fields that we're coming from. I really appreciate this opportunity and that we were able to engage in these discussions.
Luciano.
Thank you for having me speak and having the ability to tell you guys my personal opinions. And the final word that I would say is just for either if you're in the company or organization, just be conscious of trying to include everybody, and like others on the panels have said, make it understandable. That's the most crucial thing. Because if you are speaking in an engineering term to people who are not engineers, they will not understand.
You hear that, University Technology Office at ASU? Really good point. Jagan, what about you?
So once again, thanks for having me be able to give me the opportunity to speak here. It was really awesome. I loved talking to everybody. But I think something that I want to like leave the audience with is just the idea of like being mindful of your own data. I know it's hard going forward, just like we're again sharing cookies left and right, but I think too many hands in the cookie jar is applicable not only in the real world but also in the digital world. Trying to make sure that we keep our digital footprint kind of minimalized, but also being mindful that companies need to, making sure that we are mindful about what companies are doing with our data is really important.
Jagan, and there's so many extended metaphor opportunities now about cookies monsters or those lines. I think you've started probably a pun battle that can continue in the digital trust Slack lobby should you see fit. Rachel, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for the chance to be here too, for the chance to get to hear from all these other students and learn a thing or two from them too. And I guess the thing that I would leave people with is just remembering the idea of transparency, because we can all tell, right, when something is written for us to be able to understand it and when it's written to be able to cover somebody's back if things go wrong. And just the idea of focusing on making things for the people that we're making them for, and not, you know, for our own ease or convenience or profit, etc., is just so important.
That was such a powerful statement. Like, you know, when something's being written for you or to cover someone else. And I think the intent and the tone is always pretty clear. That's a really good and important point. Nathaniel.
Yes, and to reiterate, thank you all for listening to the students on this panel and myself. I think it's been a really great time to engage with these important ideas. The last little bit I would like to leave with everyone is to make sure we don't have a short memory when it comes to the increase of accessibility for remote activities and virtual engagement. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has really shown just how confining being remote and being kind of stuck in a remote environment can be. And we don't want to forget that there are people who rely on that regardless of the state of a pandemic or not. And so we want to make sure technology and privacy are keeping up with those individuals.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Really important key points to close on. And last but not least, Summer, thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you guys so much for having me here. It's been such a pleasure. I think the most important thing that I really gathered from today is just literacy in general, just being very transparent with our language and making sure that when we get our point across, we make sure that the other person understands what we're saying. And if someone doesn't understand what we're saying, taking the time to make sure that we can make sure that we're helping them digest the information that we're trying to get across. So, yeah.
I know each of you said thank you for allow you this opportunity. I just want to make sure I say thank you to you for participating. It was wonderful hearing all of the projects you're working on. I'm proud to be in the same community as you.
I'm in awe. I just want to add my thank you, Kevin, for being an excellent co-moderator, of course, and teaching me a lot about policy and data privacy and things along the way. Working with you and team has been wonderful. And to our students, oh my goodness, I think I learned more from you in this hour sometimes than I've learned in a week in my life. You've just been such a solid reminder to me and hopefully everyone else to listen to our students, to listen to our community and let their ideas and thoughts rise to the top, and remember who we're actually catering to, which is just amazing people like you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know for some of you it's summer break. Others of you also have very important day jobs. We hope you'll join us for the rest of the summit, of course. I know there's other students here in other capacities as well. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and your voice with us. Again, just blown away by your perspectives and participation. Thank you so much.